It's January here on the flower farm, and in the next couple of months I'm going to get started on my 9th season of flower farming. It's still too cold and the days too short for most flower seeds, but there are a couple of things that can be sown now that will give us a kickstart to the season and help us to produce some early flowers come late spring, early summer. Most seedlings need 10 hours of daylight in order to thrive, but the seeds I'm going to mention in today's video can be started now in January or early February. If you're planning on growing flowers this season, then don't forget to fill the early summer gap with the varieties I'm going to mention in today's video. This is particularly useful if you missed sowing autumn hardy annuals or biennials last year. Flower seeds sown now will flower around June time. June is known for being a difficult time of year for cut flower growing as spring blooms come to an end and we're still waiting for the summer blooms to get started. There's a couple of things to mention first before we get into it, and the first is frost dates. It's important to know your frost dates when sowing the varieties mentioned in this video. I'm starting these seeds now knowing that my last frost is at the end of April, so if your frost date is any earlier or later than this, then you can adjust your sowing dates to suit your climate. For some of the seeds in this video, I'm going to be using a heat mat and grow light setup like the one behind me. The mat helps them establish a little quicker by warming the soil, and the grow lights prevent leggy seedlings which usually fail to thrive and become disease prone. Remember that putting plants on a heated propagator is just to aid germination, so once the seeds have germinated they need to be moved elsewhere, so make sure you've got a sheltered place with lots of light for them. The greenhouse is ideal for this. So let's get into the seeds I'm going to be sowing this January, the first of which being Snapdragons. Now, I've already made a really comprehensive video on how to grow Snapdragons, everything from seed sowing through to harvest. So if you want to check that video out after you've watched this one, then the link will be down in the description. Snapdragons have a really long time to maturity, which is around 120 days, which is the number of days from planting out into the field until the flowers are ready to harvest. So if I sow these seeds today, they will be ready at the end of June or the beginning of July. Snapdragon seeds are really tiny, so if you want to save yourself some time, then you can just sprinkle them in a shallow tray, which is going to save the time it takes to put 1 to 2 seeds in individual cells. I'm going to top my growing medium with some vermiculite to help to retain moisture in the growing medium. I'm going to put the Snapdragon seeds directly on top of this, and I'm not going to cover them over. This is because the seeds need light to germinate. I'm going to pop these on the heat mat at 18 to 20 degrees Celsius to get them started. When they germinate and become small plants, they can be transplanted into cells to grow on. Once the plants reach a large enough size, they can be planted into their final growing position. This doesn't need to be after your last frost date, as Snapdragons are hardy plants, but make sure that they are hardened off before doing so. To do this, move your plants outside during the day and bring them back at night for about a week or so. During this time, they will become acclimatised to outdoor conditions and will become strong enough to plant out. A good all-round series to choose is the Potomac series, which produces beautiful big spikes in summer. Plant Snapdragons at 9-inch spacing. Next on my list are sweet peas, and I've had a couple of years off growing sweet peas just because I was kind of getting a bit fed up of them because they are slightly high maintenance, not in terms of sowing and growing them on, but in terms of making sure they're dead-headed and making sure that they're climbing up the support correctly. But I've been inspired by my friend Hattie from Gathered at Dusk. She grows really great sweet peas, and I'm going to give them a go again this year. And they're really easy to get going from seed. So I'm just going to fill up these pots with compost, and I'm going to place a couple of seeds per pot, and I'm going to cover them over with a little bit more compost. I'm planting them about 1 centimetre deep, which is about the depth of the seed, and then going to give them a good water and keep them here in the greenhouse until they germinate. Another thing to remember is that mice love sweet pea seeds, so keep your eye out for any of those naughty mice that might want a winter snack. When sweet peas are large enough to plant out, put them out at 9-inch spacing and plant them up against a support for them to grow upwards. The tips can be pinched to encourage branching and produce more flowers. Here's another one for those of you who like scented flowers, and these are stocks. Last year I had a really successful harvest from a January sowing of these, and they flowered in June time, and I was harvesting armfuls of stocks which just smelled absolutely amazing. So I'm going to be starting these off again this January. Stocks are another flower that love to grow on in cooler conditions, so I'm going to be using the heat mat to germinate them, and then I'm going to be moving them as soon as possible into the cooler greenhouse to grow on. Stocks are brassicas that will bolt if they experience temperatures that are higher than optimum or they become stressed. This means that they produce shorter flower spikes that are probably not going to be ideal for flower arranging. Stocks produce one stem per plant, so make sure you're sowing enough for the amount of stems that you want to produce. The seed packets also contain a 50-50 or around a 50-50 mixture of single and double blooms, so make sure that you are sowing enough if you are after those gorgeous double blooms. But to be honest, I quite like using the single blooms too, so I'm not going to thin mine out. If you want to select for the double blooms, then you can look out for the lighter coloured seedlings, which are the double blooms. I like to sow my stocks in cell trays, and I'm putting 1 to 2 seed per cell, and I'm covering with a light sprinkling of vermiculite. I'll be germinating them at 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, and once they're germinated, I'll be moving them out into the greenhouse. Once the plants are large enough, then I'll be moving them out into the polytunnel. They don't like to be stuck in the pots for too long, as this adds to the stress levels and increases the risk of the plants bolting. Next up is Colibri poppies or Icelandic poppies, and these are absolutely gorgeous, and they are always on my wish list because they have such huge tissue paper like flowers that almost look too good to be true. Colibri poppies can be difficult to germinate, but if you follow the steps in this video, then hopefully you'll have success and you'll be harvesting some of these absolutely stunning flowers come spring. I'm going to be sowing these tiny seeds on top of a shallow tray of compost topped with vermiculite, and I'm not going to be covering the seeds over as they also like light to germinate. Germination works best at between 15 degrees and 18 degrees Celsius, so I'm going to be setting my mat at 18 degrees so that it works well for all of the flowers that I'm going to be sowing today. And it might take around 5 to 7 days for the poppies to germinate, and once they've done so, I'll be moving them out into the greenhouse. Poppies don't like to experience high humidity, so it's best to bottom water these plants by sitting them in a shallow tray of water and allowing the water to be taken up from the bottom of the trays rather than watering from above. Like stocks, the poppies like to grow on in cool conditions, so as soon as they are large enough, I'll be planting them out into the ground into a well-draining location. These plants can all tolerate light frost, so don't worry about waiting until your last frost date to plant them out. Plant poppies at 9 to 12 inch spacing. My final recommendation for seeds to sow now is larkspur. This is autumn sown, but I'm also going to be sowing some now in spring. And autumn and spring provide the perfect temperatures for larkspur, which likes to germinate at around 12 degrees C. And it really likes cool nights. So I'm sowing it now, and hopefully I will have a succession to come after this one flowers in late spring, early summer. Germination takes 14 to 21 days, and I'm setting these off in the greenhouse with no extra heat provided. Larkspur requires cool growing on conditions, also known as vernalization, to trigger flowering. Ideally, this temperature is above freezing but below 12 degrees Celsius for 6 weeks. Try not to allow plants to become pot bound, so plant out into well-draining soil as soon as the plants become large enough. Plant them 12 inches apart and provide some support, as the wind can easily blow the plants over. So there we have it. That is my 5 January sown cut flowers off to a good start here on the farm. I'll be keeping a close eye out for cold snaps and any prolonged cold periods, and I will offer a little bit of protection to my seedlings. I'll throw some fleece over them or something, and once those seedlings have germinated on the heat mat, then they'll be coming straight out here into the greenhouses to experience a little bit of cold weather, which is what they like. And I'd love to know if you'll be starting any of these seeds too this spring for some early summer flowers. So leave me a comment and let me know what you are going to be growing. If you want to know what else I'm going to be growing this year, then watch out for next week's video, where I'm going to take you seed shopping with me, and I'm going to take you through my process of how I choose what I'm going to be growing here on the farm, and making sure that I'm not over ordering seeds, which is a big mistake that many people make. So hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to click the notifications bell if you want to be notified when that video comes out next week. In the meantime, there's lots of other videos on my channel which take you through the flower growing process and also share what's happening here on the farm too. Thanks a lot for watching this video, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.